Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're taking a quick look here at some important critical resistance ranges here for Bitcoin that we're traveling into here potentially in the near future. Some CPI data as well as CME gaps that are mostly filled here. This is generally a positive sign in a lot of ways, but it also could work out inversely. And I'll explain more about that. 1.72 trillion crypto market cap for altcoins. Super awesome stuff there. And of course, almost a 10-to-1 ratio for shorts versus longs getting liquidated. So these are all extremely important things. I also want to say welcome aboard to the new community members here. Be sure you take advantage of this exclusive offer here from Bitunix. Link down below for this here. It's a phenomenal option here for a nice $16,000 individual prize pool. So be sure to claim your rewards now. Links down below for that. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end liquidation data, as per usual, we're going to see what you are thinking on social media here, and effectively just understanding your perspective on, are we going up or down? Basically, I posed a question, next stop for Bitcoin, 120 or 110,000, and we're looking at a 2-to-1 ratio of 120K versus 110K on crypto Twitter. Now, we look at crypto YouTube. This is a little bit different. Let's make sure to refresh. We got 20 votes only so far, 21, a slight increase there of more bullish than bearish here, but pretty much neutral and break even for crypto YouTube. So it kind of gives us some perspective on where people are at. I'm willing to guess there's a lot of folks out there, trying to open some shorts right now that we've closed that CME gap or pretty much filled a majority of that CME gap. It's like 95% filled. So it is important to recognize that, generally speaking, when you see CME gaps and they do get filled, it typically will end in a reversal. I mean, you could see here previously the previous CME gap got filled down as low as 108,000. Price went up from there. So not proposing we're going to go straight down from here, but there is possibilities of a reversal here now that we've filled that level. Now, let's take a look here at liquidation just really quick, give you some perspective on where we're at. For Bitcoin, there was 62 million in short liquidation versus 6 million in long liquidation. It's pretty close to a 10-to-1 ratio. Ethereum 53 versus 9, and then look at Solana 38. Basically, you could just say round number 40 million versus 2 million. That is huge. Those numbers are insane. So yeah, a lot of folks got absolutely destroyed and demolished shorting yesterday. And if you saw my video from yesterday, we were pretty much leaning more towards the price going higher, right? And more importantly, just recommending not taking any shorts at this point, because when you break through that resistance, which was 113,000 for Bitcoin, then you're more likely to see the price continue to run towards that next key level resistance. Speaking of running, let's take a look here. Is the crypto net ETF inflow or outflow? In this case, it's inflows for the last 2 days have been super high. So we've got super strong amount of volume flowing into ETFs, which basically impacts the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum here. We can see Bitcoin, of course, getting majority of that market cap though. Now ETH is getting some, but it's not pumping like it should or could, just based on the simple fact that it's being suppressed in that $4,500 range, but is looking absolutely bullish now that we've broken through that key level resistance at 4,500. We'll look at that here in a minute. Let's go ahead and start off first of all with Bitcoin and just kind of see what the backend data tells us here. We can see the average top trader with basically high margin. They are essentially taking longs and they're not shorting quite as much. So there's a lot less shorts than longs right now. We can see the amount of margin being used is coming down. This does imply we're getting closer to resistances or just less confidence in trying to pump the price action higher now that we've already done so. There's that as well. So those are just some kind of things, more so food for thought, but the overall sense here is that it's relevant when top traders are active. We usually see the price continue further up. And we look here in the last, basically this is kind of just the volume delta, letting us know kind of where we're at. We can see retail is still high in volume. Volume delta here for medium, basically institutional traders, is kind of tapering off. And of course, as per usual, whale volume is pretty low. And those are like 1 million or higher volume trades. We don't see a lot of volume there unless we are getting closer to all-time high territory. Now, that doesn't need to be really all that, we don't need to dive into that too deep, honestly. What I think is more important, as per usual, is open interest. And this kind of reinforces support. So what I want to talk about here just quickly is the open interest in the last month. We're looking at more so the macro structure here today for Bitcoin. We look on the right-hand side here, we can see open interest is heavy at 114,000, 113,000, as well as 111,000. So those are 3 key levels for Bitcoin. So if you're insisting on a short, those would be good take profit targets, or consideration for a long, because the price will probably pivot and bounce if we come back to those levels, just based on simple fact that open interest is generally construed as a support or resistance zone. So more open interest below us, more propensity for further upside. You want to recognize, though, from a macro perspective, 118.5 is the next closest area of open interest above the price for now. Okay, that was from before, honestly, though, so not super relevant. When we look at liquidation delta, we're at 16 billion now. We were at 8 billion a couple of days ago, so we've doubled the amount of volume flowing in. Once again, it's that ETF net inflow that we can see here essentially coming through. Now, when we look at hold on, let's double check here. I want to look at liquidation here. On the left-hand side, we want to see here, this is the macro structure too. We're looking at the 1 month time frame on the left-hand side because all the last 7-day liquidation has been swept. Now, when we look at the macro though, just keep in mind, upwards of 126,000, we got a lot of liquidation, specifically at 119 to 118K. Now, I feel like we're going to see some resistance and some slowing pressure once we hit the $118,000 mark because we have 0.618 fib levels, a golden pocket, and we got our macro point of control there too. But there's a ton of liquidation just above, so it would make sense for us to just continue to precipitate upwards once we hit that $118,000 mark because a lot of folks are going to be trying to short that level. So anyways, some food for thought there, but liquidation does imply that we have further upside potential here. Let's go ahead and double check a couple of things here on the front end here for Bitcoin, starting with the daily time frame. Just want to recognize a couple of important factors. We talked about this yesterday and the day before. We have confluence in the sense that there is additional volume flowing in. Our money flow index is quite high, and the RSI is below the MFI. That basically implies that we have a lot more sustainability because there's money flowing into the coin, but also the viewpoint is that Bitcoin isn't overbought yet. So people are trying to buy more, right? Generally speaking, that's a very positive sign. We've talked about this majority of the entire week here, that Bitcoin, after surpassing 113,000, is now bullish, all right? Now, it's not like official, like you got to scream to the high heavens that we're going to the moon now, but it is one of those things that's kind of an important factor to recognize. And we look at we kind of zoom in a little bit on the price here. We can see both moving averages are below the price action, and our macro bullish indicator is also well below the price at about 108 to 110K. So there's a lot of confirming factors here letting us know that further upside is likely. Now, it doesn't mean we can't still pull back on the short term and correct a little bit of behavior here, a little bit of correction. I wouldn't be surprised if this weekend we see that because we've had a very green week here so far this week, right? So this was Monday. Monday, we started off this week here. Hold on. Yeah. No, sorry, correction. It was this guy right here. Monday, we are kind of in the range of 110 to 112, right? So we've done a pretty good rally since then. We've had a pretty significant amount of continuation with limited retracement. So that leads me to believe that 113,000 may be a next target area for the whales, just based on the simple fact that they want to kind of suppress the price, get in at a better value, and pump it up again. It's common for weekends to be red when we have a solid green week. That's kind of where we're at right now. So just be mindful of that. It doesn't mean we're just going to drop like a rock. Probably not. We're above all moving averages. We're not overextended here on our RSIs. Money flow index is high. We've got a lot of reasons why the price action is more likely to go higher than lower. Okay. So if you do end up shorting, make sure you watch it close. I think it's considered to be high risk if you're going to be shorting at this point, though. I don't recommend that. Either way, why don't you tell me, link down below, comment below. Use the links, of course, if you want to gather more information, specifically on that trading competition. But more importantly, comment, let me know what your thoughts are, of course, on Bitcoin. What are you thinking? Do you think we're going to go higher or lower? Do you agree or disagree with 118,000 being that local resistance? Once more, just to kind of clarify, we got our 0.618 fib level there. And if you zoom out, I forgot to mention this earlier, there is a macro point of control at that level. So if you look here, we can see we got a lot of volume right here in this guy at 118,000. Okay, so that's just some important stuff to recognize. I think 118,000, we're going to see a little bit of slowing pressure. All right, folks, let's go and take a look at the next altcoins. Quick heads up to my traders, make sure you take full advantage of this offer here from Bitunix. There's a significant deposit reward bonus as well as a $16,000 individual reward for just trading on the exchange. If you use my link to register in the past, you're automatically eligible. If you use my link to register now, you're eligible for all future trading bonuses and competitions. Check out the links down below for more information. All right, folks, let's go and jump into the Ethereum chart and kind of see what's going on. First of all, with the backend data here, and recognize 4,500 is a new potential support level for us. That's that open interest range. We had that resistance level there, and essentially, it's going to be retested as a support. So 4,500 hypothetically would be a good consideration for a long based on that premise alone. Now, we don't trade based on one thing, of course, but that is a big deal. A lot of times open interest will reflect support levels and resistance levels. In this case, it didn't really pose much of a resistance, mainly because Bitcoin is running. We see that large amount of ETF inflow for Bitcoin and Ethereum. So very, very good signs. We can also see Ethereum is in a lot of ways moving from a volume standpoint the same as Bitcoin right now, at least comparative to its own ratio. We're looking at 16 billion in liquidation long delta, just as well as Bitcoin has the same amount of volume. And we look here at the last 7 days of liquidation. Majority of local liquidation has been swept. There's a new chunk at 4,700 though, so some folks feel confident in shorting with liquidation events at that level. So keep in mind that could be very well the next target. But once more, ETH is a little on the overextended side. I'm sure people are trying to short against that just based on the simple fact that, what goes up must come down. I totally understand that, but it's still very premature in Ethereum. It has a lot of reasons to continue higher. So let's talk about that here. First of all, starting with the daily time frame, we want to recognize that we do got a 0.68 fib level. What do you know? Right there at that area of liquidation at about 4,700. So 4,700 is that level, just above the price action here at this point. So when we take a look here, of course, at the overall sentiment, we can recognize that we are in a position right now where this 0.5 fib level is at local potential resistance at about 4,600. Keep in mind, I'm using round numbers here to keep it a little simple for you. It's slightly under that, but the general consensus here is that every $100 for Ethereum is that new level resistance. Okay, so that's kind of roughly what we're looking at there. Roughly 4,600 and 4,700 are the two new resistances for us. All that said, we can see stochastic swinging up, MACD's converging, money flow index above the RSI. These are all extremely beneficial signs to look for when you're considering a long position. So the macro structure has definitely shifted bullish here, and that didn't take long. It took only 2 days worth of bullish microstructure for Bitcoin for Ethereum to totally flip on its head there. Okay, so all the more reason why shorting right now is generally a bad idea. I wouldn't recommend it. But you got to recognize too here, and this is the caveat, and this is the funny thing. The same thing happened with Solana yesterday as well, where there's massive overextensions leading into a key level resistance. And at this point here, we are now at, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. No, sorry, 7 4-hour candles. That's roughly 24 hours of overextension on this coin. So it should have consolidated at the 44.50 mark. Instead, it just continued straight up from there. All right. So we're seeing this happen right now with a lot of altcoins. It does imply that we should see a short-term correction. So if we do see a pullback to the $4,500 range, that's where I'm going to be interested in taking a long. Between now and then, unless, I'm not much of a scalping trader. I don't do that much anymore. Just too much stress. So the concept here is that you're safer waiting for an entry on a long that never happens than trying to short to that level, especially with this amount of volume flowing into this coin. So the concept remains the same here. Be safe and be careful. If you're considering a short trade, ensure you secure profits and watch it closely, because I don't think we're just going to drop super hard and super fast. It'll probably be a slow bleed this weekend if at all. Okay, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let me know. Taking a look here next at Solana. This is the monster of the group here. And if you saw this, I kind of skimmed over this, but Solana had 39 million in short liquidations versus 2 million roughly in long liquidations. That is a significant margin. It's quite the difference there. So most anybody trying to short this coin is getting hammered, and not really the best consideration at this point to consider shorting, even though it does look like it's starting to taper off and slow down. Let's see if the backend data tells us anything here. Last 1 month's worth of trading, we can see 210 is that support range for us based on open interest, but we zoom in a little bit. Last 7 days here, we can recognize as well that we still have that support at 220. So I'd say best case scenario, the price pulls back to 220. That's a consideration for a long, at least I mentioned this yesterday in my video. And then of course, for a short position, that would be a good take profit target. Now, once more, is the probability of seeing that very high right now? Not really, considering we have 9 billion in longs, and we also have majority liquidation here locally has been swept. So the truth is there's less motivation to push the price action higher on the smaller time frames. But when we zoom out and we look at last 7 days, there's very little liquidation up here too. Like nobody knows how high this is going to go. We're almost in price discovery in a lot of ways. In fact, if we zoom out here too, as far as a macro structure is concerned, just to kind of clarify, I talked about this yesterday, but to reiterate, 255 is a close approximate, will be our local resistance range for us, based on the simple fact that that was a previous high range. Of course, it's more like 255 to 260. But that little range there is kind of letting us know that we are in a position where if the price comes to that level, we should see some slowing pressure. The likelihood of the price breaking right straight through that is pretty low because there's a lot of volume and 1-day candlestick closures in that range. So just mental note, you see the 250 to 260s, you may want to consider securing profits. Obviously, it may be a different story when we go into price discovery after that, but that is kind of where we're at there for Solana. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you bullish or bearish in this coin? There's nothing telling us right now that the price is going to turn around, right? So it's just one of those interesting phenomenons that happen here. So if you are considering a short at this point, just once more, watch it very close. I highly recommend being careful with shorting potentially this weekend, just based on how strong and bullish things are right now. Okay. Just before we take a look at the next altcoin, I want to recommend you consider trading with Bitunix. If you use my link to register down below or have in the past, you'll always be eligible for future trading competitions, but this one is awesome. It's probably the best one I've seen yet, with a full-on $16,000 individual prize pool, as well as a collective prize pool as well for the top 30 traders. Be sure to check out the link down below for more information. All right, moving on to SUI. What are we looking at here? SUI on the back end is, if I recall correctly, there was a lot of open interest at 380. There's enough there, basically letting us know that that's the next potential resistance for us. Obviously, the 405 mark as well. We talked about that previously, but 360 to 365, so much open interest there, as well as 350, that shorting this coin is a bad idea. That's a simple way to understand it. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards a long in the 350 to 360 range, just based on that alone. Now, again, when I lean towards something or I talk about potentially doing something, I always reevaluate when we get there. So please understand that I'm not just going to be taking all these trades in the blind. It's very common for me to wake up and the trade already goes into where I want it to and disappears. So I try not to do that, especially with leverage. It's just not responsible. So make sure you're always reevaluating too. Taking a look at here though at liquidation, this isn't phenomenal for this coin. In fact, we've seen it upwards of 1 to 2 billion, but we're at about 300 million right now. That does imply a lot more buying pressure. Obviously, I mean, everything's pretty much up right now today. And we can see here as well, from a liquidation standpoint, last 7 days, there's still a big chunk between 370 and 380. That does incentivize the price to go higher to that 380 range. So overall, this coin's doing pretty darn good on its own. And we look at the structure here for the daily time frame. It's important to note that this coin is pretty well bullish in the overall sense, or it has, at the very least, broken its descending trend line and reclaimed those moving averages, which is usually a good foundation and something that's super important to note. We've got a pretty significant amount of control here at 350, the macro point of control based on the last, ever since April. We see the most amount of volume at $3.50. So 350 is kind of that level there for us. So that being said, that's kind of where we're at there on the macro. We are overextended leading into this, but once more, our MFI is above the RSI. And we can also see our MACD is converging. So those are generally all signs you don't want to short into, and you want to consider going with the grain, which is essentially going up, right? Taking longs. All that said, we can see a significant amount of confluence here at 350 as well, with all the moving averages kind of hanging out in this range here. So that incentivizes me to want to try to get into that level on a long position if the price were to pull back. So I'm going to be looking for an entry in the 350 to 360 range as a rough estimate here, based on confluence with moving averages. And yes, there's some fib levels there too. Please remember, fib levels mean very little outside of confluence, but we can see here 0.5 fib level has a lot more support there, and even our 0.618 fib level has a moving average or two right below it. So those are all positive signs. Okay, good stuff there for SUI. I'm looking for a short-term correction to get into a long position on that coin. Taking a look here as well for XRP, last but not least. Actually, we can double check here a couple of things here. We can recognize that 303, which was right where the price action's at, is that heavy amount of open interest here locally. We've known 303 has been a support and resistance range for a long time. But with the fact that we're bullishly backtesting that range and 295 to back it up with extra support there too, incentivizes the price to go higher, or at least, consider dollar cost averaging in the 295 to 303 range. That's the concept there. We have a long position open with an average entry at like 297. We already secured a little bit of a profit on our long, but I think we can still get a little bit more upwards of the 310 to 315 range. The main reason why is because all this liquidation, it's a heavy amount just above the price action. So we saw a little bit swept here at the 307 range, but we've still got a lot left here upwards about 320. So there's some solid meat and potatoes there for those whales, or some chum in the waters. I'm not sure the analogies, but the concept remains the same here, that we're seeing some bullish microstructures in this coin. And if we look at the daily time frame too, we can recognize as well that this basically the macro descending trend has been broken, right? I keep adding and removing this just to kind of get perspective here. I like to kind of show you what it looks like. While it's never a perfect line, of course, it oftentimes runs consistent with the 20-day SMA. And now that we're above that, it tells us we have a short-term trend reversal, or sorry, a macro trend reversal. And the short term is also looking very bullish. So looking good here on the daily time frame. We don't have overextension. Our money flow index is above the RSI. These are all signs you don't want to try to short against. And the same thing here on the 4-hour time frame. We are above all moving averages. We are in a position right now where the price action looks like it's broken its local resistance. And we got also this local point of control at 303, once more reaffirming support. So I'm going to stick to my guns here. 295 to 303 is a solid consideration for a long. And obviously we lose 295. We may have a different conversation later if we're establishing lower highs and lower lows. Between now and then, the lowest point here for the local range is 295, and that's a good consideration for long if we even see that. Okay, so this guy right here, you can kind of see that little support. So that's roughly what we're looking at there. What are you thinking about XRP? Are you bullish? Are you bearish? Where are you at? Comment below, let us know. I'd love to hear it. And obviously, once more, make sure you become a better trader if you want, just by consistently watching my videos, of course, and learning as much as you can. I always try to educate. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment below. It really helps grow the channel. Gets us in front of more people so they have a fighting chance at being a better trader. Instead of all these, yeah, I don't even need to talk about my competition, but it's pretty unfortunate. Either way, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks again so much for being an awesome part of my life. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.